you.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Metro Outer Development Assessment Panel of the 29th of May. My name's Karen Hyde, I'm your presiding member. I declare the meeting open at 9:31. I acknowledge we're hosting this meeting on the traditional land of the MODAP people of the Noongar Nation. We acknowledge the Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of Western Australia, pay respects to elders past and present, and the ongoing connection between people, land, waters and community. The meeting will be run in accordance with the DAP Standing Orders 2024 under the Planning and Development Assessment Panels Regulations 2011. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the DAP website in accordance with Regulation 42A of those regulations, and members are reminded to announce their name and title prior to speaking. Panel members may refer to technical devices throughout the meeting to assist them in considering the information before them. I'll now introduce the panel members for you today. As I say, my name is Karen Hyde. I'm the presiding member. To my left in the room, I have Dale Page, deputy presiding member. To Dale's left, I have Eugene Coltas, specialist member. And on screen, we have Mayor Margaret Thomas, local government DAP member, City of Kalamunda, and Councillor Kathy Ritchie, local government DAP member, City of Kalamunda. Welcome to those on screen. Item 2 of this part of the agenda, apologies, we have none. Item 3, members of leave on absence, none. Item 4, noting of minutes, notes of previous meetings are available on the DAP website. We now turn to part B of our agenda concerning the City of Kalamunda. And I would like to invite panel members to acknowledge that they have given due consideration to all of the documentation contained within Part B of the agenda, Part B related information, and to the R13 direction response, which was published on the 27th of May. Could I see a show of hands? Thank you. Yes, due consideration has been given by all. Disclosures of interest. I've not received any disclosures of interest at this point. I just asked the council members, was this matter considered at a council meeting?
No.
No. Okay, lovely, thank you. Were there any other interests that people wanted to raise? None today. Thank you very much. We will move ahead then in our agenda. And we come to the part where we receive presentations and submissions. For item 3.1, which is lot 29, number 14, and lot 28, number 16, Canning Road, and lot 3, number 5, Heath Road, Kalamunda, proposed fast food outlet, motor vehicle wash. Now, in accordance with the DAP standing orders, presentations are strictly limited to 3 minutes. I'll monitor that and let everybody know when they get close to time, but it is strict 3 minutes because we have a lot to get through today. No extension at this point has been granted. Some speakers are speaking on behalf of other members of the community, relatives, etc., and I'll explain that to them. Please focus on the planning matters and associated particularly with this development. Rest assured, as part of our declaration, we have all read the paperwork that you submitted to us, and so we're fully aware of all of that. After your 3 minutes presentation, I will invite panel members on screen and in the room to ask any questions that they may have. They may not have any questions, but if they do, please remain at the seat until that process has been completed. After members of the public have spoken, we will invite the developer, applicant and their consultants to speak, and after that then we will refer to council officers because we may have questions of them. So hopefully that's clear, and everybody please help yourself to a water if you need one. So first of all, we have Chris Jones, who is presenting against the application, and Chris, I believe, is online.
Yes.
Hello,
hopefully you can see and hear me.
Yes, we can indeed. So please make your presentation when you're ready.
Cool. Thank you very much. So thank you very much for the opportunity to make this contribution. And I also want to thank my students in my class who have quickly taken a break so I can fit this deputation in. So I'm opposing the development simply because I think it is a wasted opportunity for an otherwise very valuable piece of land. So the City of Kalamunda and the state government have both recognised that we have a shortage of housing. We have a shortage of housing diversity. We've got a lot of 3 and 4 bedroom homes with 1 and 2 people rattling around inside them, and they want to downsize, but they don't want to leave the hills. So they don't have anywhere to downsize to. A block of land like this 4,000 square metre block right in the middle of town, connected to sewerage, amenities everywhere, would be absolutely perfect for a mixed use housing commerce development. And I'm personally not opposed to having a McDonald's in Kalamunda, as long as it was on the ground floor of a 4-story housing service as well. So I think the very car-centric nature of the development and the efforts in the documents that are presented in this meeting to address the traffic concerns kind of highlight why I think this is a problematic development. It's encouraging more moto normativity or car-centric development. It's not encouraging housing. And I think it will also lock up that parcel of land for another 30 years, preventing more housing being built in our city. So I guess in summary, I think it's a disappointing missed opportunity. I would encourage the developers to be a little more ambitious with their development and come up with something that encourages both commerce and housing, because that's exactly what our city needs. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Panel members, any questions of Mr. Jones? Please raise your hand if you do. Ms. Page.
Just a brief one. Thank you, presiding member. Mr. Jones, I don't necessarily disagree with you, by the way, but I just wanted to check your awareness of the limited or inability of any planning decision maker to refuse an application on the basis of what it is not. There is some case law that shows we have to consider what's in front of us, not what it could be. Are you aware of that?
I totally appreciate that. I guess I would like to take the opportunity to plead to the proponents to be a little more ambitious.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? We'll move therefore to the next presenter. Thank you, Mr. Jones. You're welcome to stay online for the rest of the meeting if you wish, or move back.
I must get back to class.
Good. Okay. Thank you. Next presenters, we had Chris and Sharon Swiderski. I understand Mrs. Swiderski is unwell, and that Chris Swiderski will be presenting for both parties. So in that case, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you, President Member.
So when you're ready.
That's right, left here. Right. Start again, right? Thank you, Chair. This presentation is made on behalf of myself and my mother, who lives directly adjacent to the subject site and would be impacted significantly by this development. We submitted a submission to Council and DAP. That's attached to this. I won't go through those in any great details, but what I will put across is the fact that there were over 1,200 submissions received on this application line, whereas the activity centre plan, when that went through the process, it received 25 submissions. So there are 50 times more people were engaged in the planning process because of the decision potential for the particular site. That also highlights the fact that the activity centre plan and the subsequent amendment 106 did not really follow a process that actually engaged the community and let them understand what the implications of the activity centre plan were and what the implications of amendment 106 were in relation to the specific land uses on that site. As far as the activity centre plan goes, what has it actually achieved? Well, within 5 years, nothing. We've had an application for approval with discretion for a liquor store, same landowner on the northern side, and this application. A few solar panels on the top of Coles, but in terms of the core area of the activity centre plan, it's achieved no development outcomes that have been beneficial to the council and the community as a whole. in terms of the context of this type of development, you are talking about bringing a fast food outlet and putting it next to over 55's residential development. I looked at all the other outer metropolitan district level activity centre plans and their developments with McDonald's, and none of them have put a McDonald's next to an aged person's accommodation site. The one area that does have residential directly adjacent to a site, Kelmscott, that McDonald's was already there a long time ago. The Department of Communities developed the area to the back of it. So it fails a test of amenity and proper planning. Issues associated with traffic will never be resolved for the site because of the land use. And using the applicant's own numbers, I've obviously examined the intersection and concluded exactly the same thing. No condition can be applied to the application allowing a retrospective solution, because by that time, the cow has well and truly been grilled in terms of the outcomes. The distribution of where the traffic is coming to and from for this site is absolute key. In the applicant's documents, which are supposed to be a technical guide to provide you with a decision-making process, they said 30% of traffic will come from the north, 30% of traffic will go to the west, and 30% of traffic will go to the south. And using SA1 census data, the council's own information on interim maps, as well as the activity centre plan retail report, it is absolute false. It is a falsehood. And it will never change, because 60% of the population live to the south, 60% of the dwellings are to the south, the 4 high schools are to the south, Ray Owen is to the south. All the trips that will be generated by those sites, as well as all the residents in the dwellings, they will come to and from the south. And that means that they'll go up Canning Road, turn left, and then turn right to get back out. That won't change. Council's own review pointed out how the assumptions were incorrect. It will not work. How have officers actually assessed the parking? Because it's on the fringe of the centre, what's proposed is a car-dominant development, and it absolutely relies on car parking. How is the availability on parking on Heath Street being judged in the surrounding network? And what analysis is actually being done? Well, there was absolutely none in the application, and there's scant evidence of actual data behind support in approving a statement like this. 77D, of course, allows for discretion, but this is not a development that requires discretion. It is a greenfield development. That site has been vacant for years. It should be able to actually provide what is required under the requirements of the scheme up front, not as a discretion. What does the actual picture in the area look like? This is what it looks like. The liquor store to the north of the IGA was approved with discretion. That was a 15-bay shortage. There was a loss of 23 spaces in that area when the liquor store will be built. Then that meant that the supermarket itself had a reduced level, and that required a discretion. And now the applicant is asking for discretion of car parking across the road that will remove 50 bays at a minimum in that area, as well as 3 on-street bays. So how do you actually judge, from a council's perspective, what is actually sufficient for what is a development that relies on car parking? And the liquor store and the supermarket put in their application, they required the parking across the road that's being removed by this application for their discretion. Okay? So you've got a discretion on top of a discretion on top of a discretion. And that doesn't sit. Council's own assessment within the activity centre plan said you need a parking management strategy. They do not have that. They do not have an idea about what goes on in there. They haven't done a parking and limited payment plan, which actually would have worked out the quantum of parking required and set themselves up to actually understand what goes on in here. In the surveys that were done, that were from 2011, and then they did spot surveys for 3 other years, that showed that this area in particular had a highest occupancy because it is the core of the core around that area. And on busy times when there are events, it gets absolutely parked out. So you're removing an area and a level of parking that was supposedly accounted for in an activity centre plan. And of course, in the activity centre plan, they said everything was great because there was only 40% occupancy. That's the area that they've actually surveyed, that they've come up with that recommendation. Okay? They've done absolutely no technical base. There's no technical basis for it. It's an inappropriate use of a provision on the basis there's no factual data for you to apply the discretion allowance within 77D. Now,
About a minute left.
This stands for the number of McDonald's in Guildford. Okay? There exists a precedent in terms of conditions of refusal from that DAP application the presiding member can take confidence in. In case history, Those same planning factors apply to this very application. Development is deficient in orderly planning principles. It removes the amenity of existing residents adjacent to the site, and there are no comparable comparisons in outer metropolitan district level centres. Okay? The activity centre plan and amendment did not and should not countenance improper development being proximate to existing residential land uses. This does that. It will cause immediate negative outcomes on the surrounding network, and the application has failed twice to provide a basis from which this panel can be sure of its actual traffic impacts. It allows you to say, okay, in the future we'll do something to actually, recompense whatever the situation is. The development will result in a deficiency in car parking, and discretion should not apply under 77D regulations, as council has no actual basis from which to determine sufficiency in this area for these land uses that have already had discretions applied. That condition alone was cited in the refusal of a similar application in a heritage character area, and as objectors, we urge the presiding member and the panel members to agree with this submission and reject this application outright.
Thanks, Mr. Swiderski. Just if you could just rest there, and if we could release the presentation from the screen so that I can see the other members online. Any questions of Mr. Swiderski, members? Ms. Page?
Thank you, Swiderski. Just a quick one, and it's more for my understanding and probably deals with some stuff in your submission that we got that wasn't covered necessarily in this short time. There seems to be a strong focus in the submission on the inadequacy of the activity centre plan and the corresponding amendment and the data that underpins those documents. And it appeared to me that you have linked that to the appropriateness or otherwise of this panel exercising discretion on design elements for this. Given that, in a sense, the activity centre plan and amendment horse has already bolted, can you just comment very briefly for me on why you think that was relevant to raise that?
Yep. No, I entirely accept that. I know that I'm on a hiding to nothing in that regard. I think what I am tying that to is the fact that the actual orderly planning of the site was not undertaken at that stage by council, and their process has actually left this situation for the community to actually respond to and for you to hear this application to, okay? So the history of that site is that under the previous scheme, it was zoned as a car park, and that car park was specifically attributed to the supermarket across the road. As part of cleaning up, or the major process of cleaning up the amendment and the activity centre plan, that zone was then transferred into the centre zone or the core zone. Now, those land uses within that zone were never ever attributed to scenarios that were presented to the attendees or the engagement process within the activity centre plan. There were no images of a McDonald's on this corner and then on the opposite side where the Muzzbuzz is, a KFC and a Hungry Jack's, because that's actually what the activity centre plan says. Okay, so people will respond to the planning outcomes being put forward, and within the activity centre plan, and certainly the amendment 106, which, as I said in the submission, was advertised between November 21 and January 22. So they had 3 submissions on that because people did not tie what was in the activity centre plan with the outcomes in the amendment. And most definitely, I think if you actually ask anyone in Kalamunda, they would say absolutely that site needs development, and the previous submission had pointed that out, but that people did not actually tie together what was in the activity centre plan with scheme amendment 106. And of course, that's why we're here where we are now, because those mechanisms are in place and you're hearing the application on those particular mechanisms.
Okay, thank you. I don't think there are any further questions, so we'll let you go. Thank you very much. Next presenter is David Modolo, who is presenting against the application.
Good morning.
When you're ready.
Thank you. I might grab a glass of water first if you like.
Please do. It's can be a little daunting, but we'll get through it all together.
Thank you. Panel, Kalamunda's a pretty special place. Our community knows it, and so it's worked hard to enshrine and protect what makes our place unique. In doing so, we've created Local Planning Policy 30, the Kalamunda Activity Centre Plan and its associated built form design guidelines. And despite some valid concerns from my fellow presenter, this plan exists. Importantly though, this proposal contravenes many of those built form requirements in the policy, and in some cases grossly. While the policy requires shop fronts built up to the footpath, active frontages, awnings covering the path, this proposal has 0 active frontage and 0 awning. I ask, how can you, when the building is set back 17 metres from the boundary rather than the required 0 metres? Now, the City of Kalamunda acknowledges these departures. In response, they suggest that varying setbacks on Canning Road already exist, and therefore discretion should be applied under clause 67(2)(m) of the regulations. But with respect, that's a fundamental misreading of that clause. Clause 67(2)(m) requires you to consider not just the compatibility with what currently exists, but critically, compatibility with the desired future character of that setting. Now, that desired future character is not ambiguous. It's explicitly described in Local Planning Policy 30, which this proposal, without doubt, contravenes. Now, these guidelines, they're not loose aspirations. They are adopted and endorsed policy instruments. They set a clear direction, a fine-grained, pedestrian-focused streetscape, active frontages, awnings that meet the footpath, a built form that contributes to a cohesive and walkable town centre. These are the policy's words, they're not mine. Instead, before you is a proposal with deep setbacks, a dominant drive-through, minimal pedestrian interest, and almost no urban engagement with the street. The inconsistency of a small part of the streetscape is not a justification to diverge from the vision. It's precisely why this policy exists, to correct the planning missteps of the past and establish that coherent future. This isn't an incremental step forward towards the desired character, it's a regression. And so respectfully, I urge the panel, please consider LPP 30 carefully, which is there to deliver the vision this town has worked really hard to articulate. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Madola. Any questions of this presenter? Ms. Page?
Me again, sorry to confuse.
I was expecting it.
Mr. Madola, so reading the stuff that you submitted us, you made a statement, and you've sort of gone there in your verbal presentation, that the intent of LPP 30 is to provide clear and binding development standards that must be adhered to by all stakeholders, including applicants and decision makers. I just wanted to check your understanding that local planning policies need to be given due regard by us as decision makers. They're key guiding documents because not every development is the same. They give us some guidance, particularly when we're looking at exercising discretion, but they're not binding. And I just wanted to check your understanding.
Yeah, certainly. Look, binding is a very strong word. It sort of speaks for itself. I think the importance of that planning policy, in the absence of it, of course, your decision and guiding of discretion might be very different, but it is a document that is designed to sort of inform your discretion. And as I say, the town's worked very hard to articulate what we want as a community and put it in that document.
Thank you.
Thank you. Feel free to take it with you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Amara Turton, who is speaking against the application. Thanks, Amara.
A little bit nervous, but
Give yourself a water if you'd like to. That might. When you're ready.
Good morning, panel members. My name is Amara Turton, a proud resident of Kalamunda. I'm here today to urge you to reject the proposed McDonald's and car wash development. My primary concern is the critical issue of parking. The traffic impact assessment by Transcorp is fundamentally flawed, rendering its parking plans clearly insufficient. Firstly, the proposal offers a mere 23 parking bays for both the McDonald's and car wash. Our local planning scheme, however, mandates 28 bays for the McDonald's alone. This is a clear violation of our local planning scheme and the state planning policy, which dictates that parking must support the scale of activity centres. With an estimated 2,321 daily trips and the high turnover inherent to fast food and car wash outlets, 23 bays is simply insufficient. Compounding this, the development plans to remove 3 to 5 existing public parking bays on Heath Road. This directly contravenes the City of Kalamunda's own parking laws, which require developments to adhere to regulations and prevent negative impacts on public parking. Critically, neither the TIA, or the development application explains how losing these vital public spaces will affect our residents, visitors, or local businesses. And the City of Kalamunda officers suggest that because the site is in the town centre with public transport nearby, less on-site parking is needed. This argument is problematic. The TIA focused solely on car trips, providing no data on current public transport usage within the area. With an optimistic non-car mode share estimated at only 12 to 15%, the proposed parking is clearly inadequate. If these assumptions are incorrect, we face serious overflow parking. Furthermore, the absence of end-of-trip facilities, like employee showers, contradicts our local planning policy goals for walkable town centres. The application mentions sharing parking with the car wash fee in agreement, yet no real details on this are provided. This is a significant issue. Our local planning scheme, clause 5.7.3, clearly states share parking agreements are not automatic and are at the discretion of local government. The scheme also rightly dictates that any decision on shared parking must consider its relation to existing or future nearby land use. Consider this alarming conflict. In December of last year, the city approved a boutique liquor store at 10 to 12 Canning Road, which had a 13-bay parking shortfall. This was justified by using the 13 on-street public bays on Heath Road and existing off-street parking across from the IGA. This logic is now completely undermined. That off-street parking is set to become this McDonald's, and 5 of those crucial 13 on-street bays will disappear if this development is approved. This demonstrates a disconnected approval process destined to worsen the parking crisis within our city centre. Finally, the TIA analysis is deeply flawed. It heavily relies on the Institute of Transport Engineers Trip Generation Manual, using data primarily from the United States and Canada. Applying this to an Australian context, specifically Western Australia's unique traffic patterns, is inaccurate. Moreover, a 60-seat McDonald's, according to the New South Wales Guide to Traffic Generating Developments, requires 30 customer parking bays. This proposal only offers 11 standard bays and 1 accessible bays for the McDonald's, with a shortfall of 18 bays. The application attempts to justify this deficit by counting drive-through queuing bays as parking spaces, a direct violation of our Kalamunda Activity Centre Plan Built Form guidelines for this frontage type.
At time, I can see you're very close, so please just bring it to a close, yeah.
Thank you. In conclusion, the proposed development parking plans are insufficient based on unreliable data and reflect questionable interpretations of planning guidelines. The city officers' justifications do not adequately address these fundamental shortfalls. Approving this development will negatively impact our community. It will worsen parking, reduce amenity, compromise community safety, and undermine our local planning frameworks. The numerous planning changes and concessions already granted demand your utmost scrutiny. I respectfully ask you to reject this proposal. Thank you for your careful consideration.
Thank you very much. Just stay there and see if we've got any questions, Ms. Turton. Any questions of this presenter? Any questions? No?
Thank you kindly.
Thank you. Please take your water with you if you'd like to. Our next presenter is, now I hope I've got this pronunciation right, Gahan. Thank you very much. Presenting against the application. So when you're ready.
I'm dealing with the tree preservation. Good morning. The initial development application report mentions in some detail the retention and preservation of the 2 significant marri trees no less than 15 times, yet the tree protection zones, TPZ, allocated to them on the plan are grossly incorrect, reducing the TPZ areas by 75%. This is despite the initial arborist report specifying the correct calculations. If this fundamental misrepresentation had not been detected by a member of the public, the revised correct areas and the associated required changes to the plans to help protect the trees would likely not be occurring. To me, this is a red flag and indicates a lack of sincerity by the developer regarding tree preservation. The current arborist report details a considerable amount of care and supervision required to assist in maintaining viability of both of the trees, which is not guaranteed. A TPZ is the principal means of protecting a tree on a development site. Tree 1 has an incursion of 25.44% into its TPZ. Tree 2 has an incursion of 75.9%. These are both classed as major incursions. The arborist impact assessment states trees with a TPZ incursion greater than 50% will typically require removal, and for trees that have high retention values, an additional viability assessment is recommended. I disagree that the inherent porosity of concrete of the proposed slab around tree 2 will provide sufficient water transmissions to the tree roots, especially given the huge TPZ incursion. Porosity is not the same as permeability. Normal concrete generally has minimal permeability. There is also an area of permeable paving through the TPZ of tree 2, which is not recommended by the arborist due to the necessity to cut tree roots for installation. Should this dreadful development be given permission to proceed, I propose that instead of reinforced concrete, a truly permeable concrete be used for all of the hard surfaces to ensure that both tree 1 and 2 have much improved water access to give them some chance of survival. A company in Perth called Waterpave can install this material. As far as tree preservation is concerned, it would be far better if the car wash proposal is completely rejected, let alone the whole thing. Perth has the lowest urban tree canopy in Australia. The polyphagous shot-hole borer has intensified this problem, and Kalamunda is currently a hotspot. Retention of mature trees is paramount. Good urban planning and development considers not only the current regulations, but encompasses a holistic view and decision-making process that should lead to outcomes that respect and reflect the sentiment of the local community. Submissions to Council overwhelmingly reject this development, and so do I. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gunn. Any questions of this presenter? No. Thank you very much for your presentation. Next presenter is Alan Malcolm, who is presenting against the application.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Handshaking? No. Good sight.
I have to speed read this when we start, okay?
Okay, when you're ready.
Yeah. The sole purpose of a noise assessment is to get a realistic idea of the total noise generated by a proposed development so that the nuisance and harm to nearby residents is avoided and the standards of compliance are met. There are 6 dwellings in close proximity. Presenting the worst case possible for the noise assessment is paramount. With that in mind, all and any noise which might impact these residences must be identified and assessed. This will, if approved, be the only McDonald's in the Perth region that is sited on a secondary road and the only McDonald's and car wash in Perth close to 6 dwellings. There are 2 other McDonald's within approximately 10 minutes of Kalamunda. Kalamunda does not want or need one. The noise assessment in its current form is unrepresentative of reality. Some of the exclusions: to claim exemption under Noise Regulation 3 from noise assessment for the car wash and restaurant car park, as well as the internal driveways, is ridiculous. These are there for the sole purpose of providing access to the facilities on the premises and in no way constitute the definition of a road as a thoroughfare. The Department of Water and Environment regulations state an access road that is only used for the purpose of the premises may not meet the definition of a road, and the Noise Regulation 3 exemption may not apply. This exemption should not be permitted. These areas will contribute a significant amount of noise. It also represents a change of land use. That cars are assessed as only idling or moving slowly is also unrealistic. All noise should be assessed, including cars revving, loud music, and groups of loud people in all areas. The plant, in other words, the air conditioners, etc. Using new noise data provided by the manufacturers of the plant is unrepresentative for long-term studies. Actual field data from other McDonald's that are at least 2 years old should be used. The influencing factor, which affects the assigned levels, is based on assumptions. If the background noise is even slightly less than several of the noise assessments, if the background noise is even slightly less, then several of the noise assessments will fail. In this instance, it is important to get an accurate real value for the influencing factor by performing a proper baseline ambient noise survey at the location. A baseline ambient noise survey has not been done. Meteorological effects. For the night operation assumptions in the noise assessment, it is assuming that the plant will be running at low speed. This is potentially erroneous. There are significant numbers of hot nights in summer. The ACs may be full on. This will mean more noise. The assessment needs to include this scenario. The worst case meteorological conditions used in the assessment may not be suitable for Kalamunda. For example, the 6-month mean low temperature in Kalamunda for 6 months is 8.6 degrees, not the 15 degrees used in the assessment. In cold weather, sound travels further and is refracted down towards the ground. This needs to be explored. The Department of Environmental Regulation permits this change of the standard weather conditions. The regulation states an application that cannot demonstrate compliance with the prescribed standard or other standards set by the noise regulations may be declined or refused. When all the above factors are considered and assessed, the panel will be better placed to decide if the applicant actually demonstrates compliance with the standards. Without doing this, the panel will be making a decision that is not based on a realistic noise assessment and one that does not seek to minimise harm to the residents. And in my opinion, that would both be immoral and potentially negligent. Thank you.
You did very well.
Get it under 3 minutes?
One of those, but that's okay. Any questions of this presenter, please? No questions today. Thank you very much. Next, we have Tony Warwick. Now, Tony is also speaking on behalf of his mother, Alice, so you've been afforded 2 lots of 3 minutes, so 6 minutes, whichever order you want to take them in.
I'll do mine first, if I may, and then I will give them a comment from my mother.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
When you're ready.
Yeah, sorry, we just have a PowerPoint. So
PowerPoint, yes.
thank you. Oh, that one. Great, thank you. All right, my name is Tony Warwick, and I am here representing both myself and my mother, an elderly direct neighbour of the proposed development, who has concerns regarding safety, road access and use, because that will all be impacted. There are already real concerns in the city of Kalamunda and in relation to traffic in Heath Road, Canning Road and Haynes Road in particular. And of course, this development will then increase that in surrounding roads. I'm of the view that the crash data used by the developer was cherry-picked, with only 5 incidents identified and reported on. I think it is a failing of the application to view the development in such an isolated manner. Focusing only on crash data in direct proximity to the site is an overly simplified approach and does not wholly represent problems or incidents within the area itself. Especially when the City of Kalamunda, the DVCP review report and the revised traffic impact assessment all acknowledge that the development will apply pressure and generate direct increased traffic effects on the surrounding road network. When the crash data is reported on across a broader range of the area, encompassing additional sections of Canning Road accessing the site, along with alternate likely rat runs that will be used to access the main distributor roads of Canning and Kalamunda roads during congested periods, there is an astronomical increase in the crash data. The developer identified a total of 5 crashes relative to the site in their analysis, whilst a broader review including the surrounding road network identifies a total of 19 incidents. Furthermore, an analysis of the crash data pertaining to Canning Road itself between the Kalamunda Road intersection and Cotherstone Road, which encompasses the development site and provides primary access to the development, identified that Canning Road in this 1.2 kilometre stretch meets all necessary criteria to classify for the Main Roads Black Spot Program 2025-2026. There is a unilateral acknowledgement that this heightened a risk to road safety by the developer, the city, DVC and the RTIA. The development will have very real traffic consequences for the community experienced by the people who live there and not necessarily the developer themselves. Whilst the City of Kalamunda makes a provision for a condition to be applied that stipulates that the developer must upgrade the intersection, it is not clearly defined and no mitigation strategy is defined. Considering the greater crash data for the surrounding road network and the potential for Canning Road to be designated a Main Roads WA black spot, if the city and the developer are serious about community safety regarding the intersection, access and egress of the site and the surrounding community, and the contribution to increased traffic volumes and road safety risk within the community, then the only adequate solution, it would appear, is to develop infrastructure that includes traffic lights at the Canning and Heath Roads intersections. And if I could address the comments of my mother.
Indeed, thank you.
Thank you. And in just saying that, if I may start, whilst my mother is 95 and elderly, she lives independently, drives like Fangio, is an accomplished playwright, author, attends philosophy, yoga size classes, so she's very much with it. So she's asked me to do it, but she doesn't like early mornings. All right, so dear panel members, I understand your main interest to be discussed the design and traffic, so I'll deal with those first. I also understand that any submission must be factual, based on planning issues only and not emotive. However, in making the submission, I would further declare that I, as a directly affected neighbour, vehemently oppose the application, as do all the other residents of number 18. I understand that following observations from the City of Kalamunda, the applicant is to build a solid masonry fence between the McDonald's car wash and number 18 and their land holdings. I would ask the panel that if the application is unfortunately successful, the masonry fence to combat noise from the drive-through area immediately adjacent to the boundary and only a few metres from our homes should be limestone. With the quality of mature trees being removed, limestone will reflect more light. I also note that the City of Kalamunda has suggested a reduction in the height of the Golden Arches sign from 8.5 to 6.5 metres. I would seek that there is no Golden Arches sign at all, as is common in numerous McDonald's around the world in cities, particularly Europe, and as is the case in the City of Perth, some couple of hundred metres along William Street from this building itself. McDonald's buildings are recognisable in their shape and build and signage effect, which is sufficient to advertise their purpose. A large 6.5 metre sign in height with electronic light, causing both visual and light pollution, is not appropriate for the visuality and ambience of the city. In relation to the increase in traffic and on the issues it would cause on the intersections of Canning, Heath Roads and Canning Road, Haynes Street, it was already extremely difficult for the occupants of all the over 55 housing on Canning Road to get out on the road where the traffic has significantly increased 100% in the last few years. Already one death of an elderly resident close to the IGA during crossing of the road is one too many. Danger to elderly residents and the increase in younger school children drawn to McDonald's will, in all likelihood, increase comparability. As one of the elderly residents residing peaceful for a number of years at number 18, the approval of McDonald's will significantly disrupt what has been to date peaceful lives, as well as losing a number of life-giving trees on the proposed site. Being able to sit outdoors in our courtyards will become uncomfortable and stressful due to noise pollution from the speakers in the drive-through, plus the smell pollution, and there will be significant decreases in our fresh air intake due to the exhaust fumes of vehicles. Further, despite the COK deeming that management will control fumes and smells from McDonald's, I would challenge any member of the panel who has ever visited a fast food outlet to deny that even with the best equipment available, the smells of the product will still permeate the surrounding areas. Lastly, both the noise of the McDonald's speakers, the car washes and the significant increase in vehicles and their loud exhaust stereo systems will have a significant detrimental impact on our health and mental well-being. I observe that across other local councils, young people are losing access to basketball courts and the like due to noise complaints from neighbours. I therefore fail to understand how the City of Kalamunda supports the nature of the application and the noise pollution that will occur in a neighbourhood not conducive to the same.
Thank you.
I just, sorry, may make one observation. So as I'm now retired, but I spent 40 years in law enforcement, integrity agencies, etc., so I'm well experienced in these areas. I have difficulty in explaining to my mother how, despite there being 1,073 submissions against and only 81 for, they seem to have been brushed over in the council review. In particular, one relating to antisocial behaviour, where it's gone, yes, well, the thing will be operating 24 hours a day, there will be lights. Well, I'd like to make the observations, I'm sure the panel know and everybody else present, you only have to look at the McDonald's on William Street, you only have to look at the McDonald's on Hay Street, you only have to look at McDonald's in every other state of the country to know. They're 24 hours, they have lights, they have people there, but antisocial behaviour can be prevalent, and that is a concern.
Thank you very much. Just stay there for a second, please, Mr. Warwick. Any questions of this presenter? Yes, please, Mayor Thomas, thank you.
Not so much a question, but just a comment. Tony, you talked about it's been brushed over by council. This application has not been to council, so you can't include councillors in what is in the application. It's prepared by planners, so I just wanted to make that clear.
Okay, I therefore apologise for the comment in the view that the report presented to this DAP has looked at, raised the things in relation to the number of it, and then the antisocial behaviour. I'm taking the comment from the DAP. My apologies, I thought it was prepared by the council's administration.
That's okay. Thanks for the clarification. Other questions? Yeah. You're good, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Next we have Rachel Davison, who is presenting against the application. Thank you. Oh, Tony, did you pour your water? Did you just want to take your water with you? So we can...
That's fine, thank you. I'll move it out the way so someone doesn't grab it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good morning. My name is Rachel Davison. I'm a resident of Lesmurdy, and until a few weeks ago, I owned a small business in Kalamunda. Heritage is an important part of Kalamunda's past, present and future. As a gateway town to the surrounding vineyards and orcharding areas, there has been considerable effort to promote the image of Kalamunda as a unique village offering something different for visitors to experience. The main reasons that this development is inconsistent with Kalamunda are as follows. The development will have a poor aesthetic impact on Kalamunda. Kalamunda is a gateway to a uniquely beautiful area in the Perth Hills. Building a McDonald's will detract from the town and devalues its branding as a unique and interesting destination. The visual pollution of bright logos, drive-through lanes and neon signs will disrupt the visual harmony of the town and its unique character. This disruption will be felt most keenly by neighbouring residents and small local businesses. Cultural dilution of our town. McDonald's represents a globalised corporate culture which dilutes or overshadows our local food traditions, stories and independent businesses that form part of the town's heritage. Heritage towns thrive on authenticity, which attracts tourism and fosters community pride. A corporate chain has the potential to make the area feel more generic, detracting from its unique character. Kalamunda's authenticity will certainly be reduced if this development goes ahead. Economic displacement harming local businesses. The presence of McDonald's will siphon business away from already established local cafes, restaurants and eateries that contribute to the town's cultural and culinary heritage. The potential additional competition would add another layer of difficulty for many local businesses that are already doing it tough. Reducing the tourism experience. Tourists visit heritage towns such as Kalamunda to experience something different from their daily lives, history, local cuisine in natural settings. And McDonald's undermines this by providing a standardised inferior product. Seeing a fast food chain in a historical natural setting can disappoint visitors expecting an immersive heritage experience. This heritage extends to our amazing natural areas that will be impacted by increased levels of litter to the detriment of flora and fauna. Community backlash and identity crisis. Strong local opposition to the development could result in residents viewing the development as an imposition by corporate interests and a betrayal of community values. Fast food chains attract more transient visitors and contribute to depreciation of property values, slowly altering the character of the town and displacing long-term residents. Our heritage is something to be celebrated and preserved. This McDonald's development proposal will disrupt, damage and degrade Kalamunda, our home in the forest.
Thank you. Any questions of this presenter, please? Ms Page.
Thanks, Rachel. So your presentation outlined some interesting points in how the proposal could erode the local identity and heritage value of the town. And we don't often get that as a point of objection in relation to something like this. The underlying planning framework categorises a fast food outlet as a permitted use, and the framework and this panel isn't able to differentiate between different fast food operators. So I just wanted to make sure that you understood that, and I wanted to check whether it is specifically a McDonald's that causes you this concern, or if it is fast food outlets in general.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, we do have some fast food outlets already in Kalamunda. I'm certainly not blind to that. I think it's more that it's probably the positioning of the actual location is for me problematic. It is a gateway to our town, and I feel like that's not consistent with what we're trying to promote. But it's not McDonald's specifically. It's more the location and the. I just feel like it's not consistent with what we're trying to promote as a community.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much. Next, we have Michaela Simonson, who is speaking against the application. Thank you. Have a top up. Right, when you're ready.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Michaela Simonson, and I'm here today speaking on behalf of the Kalamunda Community Group Oppose Kalamunda McDonald's and Car Wash. On behalf of the greater Kalamunda community, I express our communal objection to the proposed development by McDonald's to build a 24-hour drive-through restaurant, car wash and dog wash. The community objects on the grounds that the development is insensitive to the amenity of Kalamunda and a direct threat to its village and home amongst the forest identity. There is insufficient parking outlined for all three businesses that will occupy the site, and relying on drive-through queues and reciprocal parking within the vicinity of the development is a lax approach at best. The development will cause systemic knock-on and severe traffic issues for Kalamunda, which are a risk to general road safety, which is alarming when considering that Canning Road stretch past the development already qualifies for the WA Main Roads Black Spot program. The development, with its car-centric modelling in conjunction with the predicted increases to foot traffic from both schools located nearby, will also exacerbate pedestrian danger. There is a valid risk to security in the area, including an increase to antisocial behaviour due to the 24-hour nature of the business's operation hours. There are multiple negative environmental and pollution impacts, which include noise, litter, car fumes, odour and tree protection. Its proximity to two schools within the area directly contravenes the Western Australian Health Promotion Strategic Framework and is inconsistent with the objectives of the WA Public Health Act. Development will create many adverse and negative effects for the site's direct neighbours, including the Uniting Church. And this proposal fails on the planning considerations on amenity, parking, built form, traffic, road safety and pedestrian safety. 87% of respondents voiced their objection to this development during the public consultation period and believe the development is not suitable for the site. The proposed development does not constitute robust planning or thorough adherence to planning laws in its execution. The Kalamunda community implores you to reject this development on our behalf.
Thank you, Ms. Simonson. Sorry, different pronunciation.
Happens all the time.
Any questions of this presenter? Ms Page.
Just a quick one, if you don't mind. So you have mentioned impact. You specifically mentioned the impact of uniting the church. Why do you feel that the church and its operations would be impacted? In what way?
I feel that when you're in the community, the church itself conducts quite a few activities on their premises that benefit the community, especially as a place of worship. I think putting a light industrial development like a car wash adjacent to the church premises isn't conducive to the people who are using that space for their practices of worship. I just don't think it's respectful, and it's probably too noisy.
I'm going to sort of push that a little bit. We sometimes get asked to consider places of worship, and we often get a lot of objection to the establishment of places of worship because of traffic, car parking, noise, and disruption that emanates from those places. So I wouldn't mind if you can comment on why you feel that the impact from the church on the surrounds in terms of noise, car parking and so on is not so much an issue, but the impact of the use adjacent would be an issue.
The church itself isn't that big. The congregation's quite small. So when we liaised with the community and I went there, it's not a big congregation. It's quite small and respectful. They do have adequate parking on site. They've got quite a large car park. They also often utilise the Heathrow off-street parking, which we're going to lose bays from. It doesn't seem to heavily impact greater parking beyond their premises. So I think they've been long established and they're quite a harmonious part of the community in Kalamunda.
Thank you. No further questions of this presenter. Thank you. Do you want to take your glass with you?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Mr. Mark Bray speaking in support of the application. We've also allowed Mr. Benham Boardbar to speak for the in support of the application. You need to come over this side as the previous presenters. Thank you.
Thank you, Presiding Member. We're also joined by various members of our project team. They're on hand to answer any questions.
Yes. So let me just check. I've got a note of who those people are. We've got Todd Wood from McDonald's, or representing McDonald's, David Cudahy representing Arbor Tree Management Solution, and
Jennings Lowe, the building designer.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jennings. Now, you've each been allowed 3 minutes, so as for previous presenters, I'll let you know when you get close to that. Which order are you going in?
Myself first, Presiding Member.
Thank you, Mr. Ray.
And sorry, Presiding Member, if you're minded, happy to give a collective presentation and answer questions.
All right, we'll just let you run straight through and then we'll ask questions all together. All right, thank you. When you're ready.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I will be speaking in support of the application this morning. We are pleased to receive the officer's recommendation to approve this application. We thank the City's officers for their collaboration and engagement throughout the application process over the last 12 months. We appreciate this application has attracted significant interest among the community and understand the concerns that have been very well articulated this morning. The City's RAR comprehensively assesses the proposal and its merits against the relevant planning framework and appropriately responds to the concerns raised. As demonstrated in the RAR and various technical consultant reports and assessments submitted with the application, a significant amount of work has been undertaken to address and mitigate these concerns. My presentation summary provides further detail and context in relation to the suitability of land uses and trading hours within a district centre, the key site considerations influencing the overall site layout and design, the suitability of car parking, having regard to the specific car parking considerations in the City's Kalamunda Activity Centre plan, of which I'd be pleased to answer some questions and provide some further clarification, and the previous work prepared as part of the City's Kalamunda Activity Centre plan, so that's previous traffic work. We've also requested minor amendments to conditions 3, 4, 5 and 7 but would be happy to clarify these matters following the presentation. This morning, I intend to provide some further and brief context in relation to the site considerations and overall design outcome. Considerable effort has been made to preserve the 2 existing marri trees. The value and importance of these trees has been recognised by the community and was acknowledged by our project team from the commencement of this project. It has also substantially influenced the overall site planning and design outcome. The overall site layout, location of buildings and access ways has been carefully considered and centred around the preservation of these trees. Our design team has worked closely with a project arborist and a civil engineer to implement certain design measures to improve the ability to maintain and retain the trees. This is by no means a standard McDonald's restaurant. We work closely with the city's officers and our design team to integrate design treatments, colours and materials that align with the context and character of Kalamunda. As recognised in the RAR, there are certain characteristics and operational requirements associated with the fast food outlet, again, which is a permitted land use, have been integrated into this design. We have made several improvements to the design throughout the application process in response to various feedback from the city's officers and also the DRP to align with the design intent of the city's design guidelines, whilst also and importantly accommodating the operational characteristics of the land uses. These have included very briefly a well-articulated facade along the Canning Road street boundary, a clearly defined pedestrian gateway and entrance from Canning Road, public seating at the intersection to provide a public space that connects with the pedestrian network into the town centre, and various items of materiality that have regard to the character of Kalamunda. These have included the use of brickwork, timber, laterite stone, earthy colour tones and pitched roof elements. In our view, this proposed development strikes an appropriate balance between preserving the 2 significant trees, accommodating the operational and spatial requirements of the proposed land uses, and creating activation along the Canning Road frontage. For these reasons, we respectfully request the panel approve the application. I'll now hand over to Ben and Board Bar to discuss the traffic considerations, but we'd be pleased to provide any further clarification in relation to our requested amendments as well.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning, presiding member, panel and officers. And thank you for the opportunity to speak. I will be speaking in support of the development as well. I just wanted to outline 2 key points. The first being the intersection, which was identified during the activity centre planning and by the traffic assessment which was done. And some interventions at the intersection was anticipated to be required in the future. And the analysis has shown that that intervention is required simply because of the growth of the traffic and not this particular development. Nevertheless, the applicant has agreed to work with the city to develop interim measures and intersection interventions to deal with the anticipated traffic and improvements on that. And then there is obviously a requirement for some ultimate solution that requires significant further studies and investigation by city, which are not not relevant to this particular development. So that's an important point to make in our view. The second point obviously is the community interest, and we acknowledge that interest, and it's not unusual with the projects of this nature, and we almost go through the same process every time. But the key and important item is that all the relevant key points have either been addressed or there is an agreement with the city in terms of the way forward. So there are no loose ends, if you like, with this application. And that's the other key point that I wanted to make. On that note, I think we conclude our presentation and happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you very much. I'll refer to members on screen first of all. Mayor Thomas, did you have any questions of these presenters or of other of their team members who are available for questions?
Just to confirm, we had conditions 3, 4, 5, 7 and 1, and your changes don't really change those conditions, they just make them joined up, and so you still accept the basis of our conditions. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. That's my only question.
Thank you, Mayor Thomas. Councillor Ritchie, did you have any questions of the presenters or the other members of their team?
Yes, I do, just briefly. And I acknowledge that there are a number of mitigating elements that the developers have put in with regards to the neighbours to the south. But can you give an undertaking that the elderly residents to the south will not have a diminution in their quality of life?
Councillor, with respect, we can't give that qualification. We can only deal with the planning application and the proposal that's in front of us. And through that, we've provided a lot of specific assessments, technical assessments that demonstrate that this proposal will not have any adverse effects on the amenity of the surrounding properties.
Any further questions, Councillor Ritchie?
No, that's fine, thanks.
All right, thank you. Panel members in the room, questions? Ms Page.
Yes, thank you. And I'll leave it to you to decide who answers. So you talked, Mark, briefly about the marri trees, but can you comment on the concerns that was raised by one of the presenters about the tree protection zones and also on the request for permeable paving? Can you comment on that?
I might invite our project arborist up to comment. I can comment on in part. So as part of that design notice, there is a footpath surrounding the central marri tree. So that is where we've implemented those permeable pavers to provide that opportunity further. Sorry, would you mind?
So, Mr Cudahy, would you like to answer? Thank you.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
So the question was, we understand the attempts that have been made to retain and protect the marri trees, but one of the residents has raised a concern about the adequacy of the tree protection zone. So I'd like some comment on that, and also requested the use of permeable paving more broadly to assist with water absorption. Can you comment on that?
Concrete. Thank you for clarity. Thank you.
Yes, I guess tree protection zone, they're never really adequate. The best thing we can do is to stay out of them entirely, but if that's not possible, then we try and provide as much as we can. We just try and capture as much as we can. So I kind of feel for this tree, what we do have left is, it should be adequate. And I think with some careful preparation, which I've recommended in the report, we can actually remediate the existing soil that's there, and I'm ambitious that we can actually improve the health of this tree through those measures.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Yes, please. Can you also comment, there were concerns raised by one of the presenter, well, some of them, but during one of the presentations about the perceived inadequacy of the noise assessment. Can you just talk about that for us?
Only in a general sense. Unfortunately, our acoustic engineer is not on hand
Okay.
today to answer those specific questions. But the acoustic assessment has regard to all of the matters you'd expect that generate noise on this site. So they look at the delivery vehicles, they look at car activity within the drive-through, car doors closing, all of those relevant matters, and they build their model based on those critical items and recommend mitigation measures to comply with the regulations. So as a consequence of that analysis, we do have a masonry wall along that southern boundary and also an acoustic fence along the existing boundary.
Thank you. Just now on the issue of traffic and the request to amend those conditions. Before I talk about those conditions, can you just explain why the upgrade to the intersection is preferred over installation of signals?
Okay, installation of a signal is a major project and it involves approval of main roads. so it involves a third party. We don't know that the details of an application would be supported by Main Road at this stage because they've got obviously specific requirements. So however, that's part of the long-term ultimate options that needs to be explored. In reality, we are in a town centre environment, like any other town centre. And you do get certain level of traffic congestion in a town centre environment. Also, realistically speaking, ultimately, there are only two options for that intersection that can be considered. One is traffic signals, and the other one is a roundabout. So when you do actually apply for a traffic signal to main roads, you do need to also assess a roundabout option and compare the two options. So that's a separate matter, and of course, the peer review report made that recommendation to the city that they, separate to this application, they do need to investigate ultimate arrangement for the intersection, but those ultimate arrangements cannot be looked at in isolation. So a certain length of Canning Road needs to be considered, and city obviously have taken that on board. So what we are doing, we are dealing with the interim, providing some solutions that deal with the current situation.
Okay, great. Now, if we look at that interim solution and your request to combine conditions 3, 4 and 5 and to require all those actions within 12 months of occupation. So that is actually quite a significant change. It's subtle, but it is quite significant. My question is, why shouldn't the scope of that work be agreed and included in the TIA before the DAP makes a decision on this application? And why shouldn't we require the works on the intersection upgrades to be completed before occupation and use of the development versus 12 months after?
If I may answer first, then Mark can add. Assuming that we achieve approval, those discussions with City will start immediately in terms of the interim intervention measures at the intersection. And we've had already some discussion, and the reason that we haven't been specific collectively about those measures is that there needs to be a little bit of investigation. One of the options is to widen the Heath Road approach to the intersection, so you have a separate left and right turn lane. There are some services in the verge that needs to be investigated. And the other option, which has been flagged by others, is to simply ban the right turn movements out of Heath Road onto Canning Road. Now, so those measures needs to be investigated, and again, a reality of the matter is it may not be a consideration for that there is a time frame consideration for the application, and through agreement with City, we said that we know realistically what can be done. There is nothing else can be done. So immediately after the application is concluded, those investigations commence. And if agreement is reached on a solution quickly, a feasible solution, there is nothing prohibit that to be implemented prior to occupation. It's just we don't know at this stage.
So I have a follow-up question. If this DAP were to allow that development to operate for up to 12 months before the intersection upgrades are complete, could this in any way pose a safety issue for road users, or would it really only result in longer waiting times and the inconvenience that goes with it?
No, it doesn't, in my opinion. I'm a experienced road safety auditor. I've been practicing for over 30 years, and I acknowledge some of the crash data which has been put forward. I think it's important to put that in context, which is related to your question. The threshold for black spot definition is on purpose set low to allow the local authorities and other authorities to put together an application for black spot funding. However, black spot funding works on a cost-benefit ratio, so it has to be a positive BCR ratio for it to even get up as an application, and it goes into the pool of application. I mean, my view is, despite opinion of the presenter that I respect, my view is that those number of crashes over a 5 year in the quite a big area doesn't concern me at all in a city center environment. So the safety will not be impacted. Safety is not directly related to congestion. Delays can cause frustration and therefore unsafe movements. But in the interim, I think that will work. I don't think we get to that point. I think the intervention will ideally should occur by the time the restaurant opens. It just provides some flexibility. There will be some increased delays, but there is an alternative connection to Canning Road further south, so patrons can come down and take that route, or alternatively patrons and people figure out, and traffic is like water, is fluid. People figure out and they may decide that it's easier for them to turn left and make the U-turn at the roundabout. So I don't believe the safety would be undermined at all.
Thank you. Just one more, if you don't mind. Is there an intention to amalgamate these lots? I note one of the submitters raised the issue that some of the parking for McDonald's might be located on the site for the car wash. Can you comment on that?
Yes, I can. We lodged a subdivision application for the amalgamation concurrently with this development application. That's the determination of that application has been extended by the department pending the outcome of this application. We have included in that application reciprocal access and parking easements. So the parking that is available on the car wash site will also be available to McDonald's customers and staff.
Thank you. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Coltas, questions?
Yes, just out of left field, was it ever considered to restrict the trading hours at this site? I mean, the community says it's a quiet location, it's a village atmosphere. Where's the demand for a 10 a.m. to 6 a.m., a 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. trading?
The demand is generated by being a facility that does trade 24/7 and offers that additional service. So we found that shift workers, nighttime workers are typically the people that would attend over that period. A similar question was asked at the DAP meeting for the Mundaring McDonald's application just off Great Eastern Highway. And there was a lot of emphasis on 24/7 within the context of that community. I'm not saying that community is the same as this one, but it's a similar hills context and disconnected from the other Perth metro area. And in that, we actually determined that 24/7 was appropriate, that was supported. But then there was the actual trading hours were reduced slightly based on an operational and business decision for demand in that area. So the starting point always is 24/7 associated with the type of services that McDonald's provide.
You mentioned Mundaring, it's on a national highway, isn't it?
Yes, it fronts the primary.
Significant.
Yes. Yes.
Adam, you've mentioned the interim treatments. And you mentioned the difficulty in getting traffic lights. Do you have an estimate of the cost of those traffic lights?
Traffic lights, unfortunately, now there's a significant cost, and it would be in the millions. And do you have an idea of the volume of traffic, say from 10 p.m. till 6 a.m. through that area? That information is available, but I don't know that top of mind.
Okay. When you said an interim would be widening of Heath Road for a left turn in front of IGR, I presume. There's several on-street bays there, isn't there?
Well, there is a short section which is after the on-street bays. And again, depending on the analysis, that short section might be adequate. Now, that lane is already quite wide, so we have observed that from time to time, you do see cars side by side at that location. But I think it would be appropriate to, if feasible, to widen that by another meter or so, line mark it, so provide quite clear guidance. And from memory, that section that doesn't impact on the parking bays can accommodate at least 2 cars, if not more, queuing before you get to the parking area.
So the problem is that you've got a right turn movement out of Heath Road, and the queue starts forming because of they can't move. Whereas if you had a left turn lane, that would reduce that kind of delay.
Correct.
Existing delay it is.
Correct. I mean, those are the exact details that needs to be investigated, discussed with the city, potentially discussed with other stakeholders who may be impacted. That's why exactly we needed a little bit of flexibility in time to be able to work with the city in terms of coming up with an appropriate solution.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
I have some questions, thank you. Mr. Boardbar, the work that was done by Donald Field Consultants, the peer review, suggested a number of areas for review in the traffic impact assessment. That was dated March 25 of this year, and it was about the distribution and assignment of the development trips, passing trade calculations, the impact on Heath Road, Canning Road intersection with particular focus on the right turn, revised SIDRA analysis, and location and safety of crossover number 1. Now, I know you looked at the crossovers and you've revised plans which are before us today, which move away from that intersection. But what about the other aspects in terms of distribution, passing trade calculations? Were those revisions carried out in accordance with those comments that were received, or did you resolve that the information that you had put in your original TIA was adequate?
Subsequent to the peer review, we had a meeting at City, which was attended by various technical officers as well as the representative of the DVC consultant.
Yeah.
We agreed to disagree on some items because some of those items that you mentioned are assumptions, and my assumptions may be different to somebody else's assumption. Doesn't mean that one is correct and the other one is incorrect. But on those items, I think I'm correct in saying that we also agreed that they won't really have a significant impact on the outcome of the analysis. And we agreed on other items, and as a result of that, a revised
Yes.
traffic report was prepared and submitted. Now, as part of the conditions of approval,
Yes.
we are to pending on the solution. Another revised traffic report needs to be submitted, and no doubt some of the agreed to disagree items will need to be revisited because they are directly related to the nature of that intersection and ability of that intersection to comfortably or otherwise accommodate traffic.
Okay, so in terms of steps, that revision or investigation, I think you used that word, to that intersection needs to be conducted. The interim revisions, which are, if you like, have a clear need and nexus with these two car-dominated uses which are occurring in this location, need to be agreed. And then prior to finalising that design, you need to conduct a further traffic impact assessment, which may or may not, depending upon assumptions and agreements, cover off some of those aspects of the peer review, but in the context of those investigations and proposed interim solution. Now, if I'm right in all of that, and I can see that you're nodding, what impact is that likely to have in terms of the layout of this development, the amount of car parking, the distribution of car parking within this layout of the application? For instance, following through from Mr. Coltaz's question, if there is some widening of the lanes, that may have a knock-on effect of the footpaths, may actually require potentially some land to be ceded. Whether you do or you don't get from one landowner, you might have to concede more on the side of the street of this particular development. And sorry for the long question, but I will get there. And we also have in the background the draft condition from the Planning Commission's subdivision assessment of an 8.5 metre truncation, where I think you're suggesting that this application or any conditions associated with it should reduce that to a 3 metre truncation. So how do we factor in revisions to that truncation versus other revisions which might occur within that intersection and information that we don't have at the moment, because those are the steps that you propose to take?
I think all those steps and the impact that they may have will be external to the site. And that's because any widening that needs to occur, for example, for the separate left and right turn lane option, needs to occur on the other side of the road. The widening, as I mentioned earlier, won't be 4 or 5 metre widening, which affects land. It can be accommodated within the reserve. The only sort of, I suppose, uncertainty is the point that Mr. Coltas raised, that whether there would be any impact on the on-street parking, that whether we need to utilise that space for the additional length of the left turn lane. But any of those impacts or solution won't have an impact on the site or the parking layout or the parking numbers, are all external to the site. The only item is the truncation that I understand there is agreement with the city on the 3x3 truncation instead of that huge truncation, which did have some implications, in my view, about safety. Because on that corner, we are proposing landscaping, we are proposing a bench, and that big truncation would put the bench next to the traffic lane. So I'm not overtly concerned at all that any of those investigations, any of the steps that you outline will have any bearing on the site itself or the parking layout and any other matters.
Okay, so when I was reading, and as you pointed out, we ended up with 2 traffic impact assessments, we ended up with technical note, we had a number of things to consider. Initially, I was reading that your assumption was that there would be capacity within the road network to allow for these developments, and the 10% above 100 vehicles an hour or whatever. But I did notice that, and I think Donald Veal picked this up, that there's actually about 240 odd trips, or certainly each way, more than 100. So am I understanding now that you do accept that revisions to that intersection, even at an interim level, are required to support this development, that this development has an impact, will have an impact upon that intersection?
We already have agreed with the city that we are going to deal with that, and we are going to either fund or contribute to that improvement.
Okay, all right, thank you. I had a couple of other questions for Place Fabric, but they're not here. But perhaps Mr. Ray, you could respond. I think it's fairly unusual for us to receive a design, and I will ask the city the same question, the design review panel assessment that is fairly harsh. There's a lot of, not everybody likes the traffic light system, not the road traffic light system, but the design review panel system. There's an awful lot of red in that. But obviously the officers have assessed this as, well, it's okay. How would you say the design has responded to the good design principles in the context of Kalamunda and in the context of the design guidelines, or LPP 30?
Firstly, I would agree with the sentiment of the what appears to be a harsh assessment from the DRP. We presented this proposal in a similar manner with tree protection at the forefront, and they were the reasons and the drivers or the influences for this type of design. What we think that the DRP didn't appropriately recognise was the operational characteristics of this business. We've talked about the fast food outlet, it being a permitted land use. You've heard me talk before about these types of land uses under SPP 4.2 being entirely appropriate with the district centre. So there is some context there. We attended a pre-lodgement DRP through our standard designer, and the feedback that we received, and that proposal included an 8-metre high pylon sign on the corner. We did make an effort to try to integrate some screen or activity or materiality in the building, but following the feedback from that DRP, we actually did represent there was a bit of a gap in our design and how it aligns to the context and character of Kalamunda. So we did appoint Place Fabric, and they came up with an outcome that we think really works well in the context, having regard to the operational requirements. You've heard me talk about that a few times now. That facade and the outdoor seating area, I think, combines well to provide activation along that street. We've introduced brickwork, pitch roof elements, laterite stone, crepe myrtles that are a landscape recommended by the city's landscape master plan. So it's a combination of these things that we believe have responded to the context and design considerations.
Okay, thank you. We've heard a bit from presenters today, and obviously there's quite a lot in the submission package that we've received as well around antisocial behaviour. Now, sometimes that can be actual, sometimes that can be a perception and a concern of the community. How does this development proposal deal with matters of SEPTED, crime prevention through design, and how do you propose to look out for potential for antisocial behaviour and, avoid that from occurring?
The starting point is the 24/7 operation of the business. So it is a well-lit site. We've toned down the lighting to deal with the context of Kalamunda, but we've also designed it with that public seating area. So that's something that has good visibility from the dining room of the restaurant and provides some output externally as well. Antisocial behaviour is a difficult one in the planning context, which I'm sure we're all aware of. But McDonald's does employ certain measures like CCTV. They are very responsive to the police when they need to be. They do very much care for their customers and their staff. So safety is part of their operation.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions?
I just had a query going back to the truncation. You've got a subdivision application or amalgamation application in. They're asking for 8.5 metres, are they?
Yeah, it was on request by the city.
For an 8.5 truncation?
Yes.
Did your application show any truncation?
No, we hadn't.
Okay. So, and you're sort of saying 3 metres is adequate?
A 3x3 metre truncation from a sightline perspective, which is the assessment tool.
If it did go to 8.5 metres, could the park on the corner, should I say, on the corner, still exist with a licence from the city? There's examples of infrastructure on private developments that exist in road reserves, like tables and chairs on footpaths and that, but they have to be licensed and also carry public liability insurance. So that can happen even with an 8.5 by 8.5.
Possibly, I'll just comment on that first, Ben. The 6x6 truncation, so the 8 metre truncation or 8.5 metre truncation, does, in our view, kind of take out that landscape bed. So we've used that as a landscape design feature as part of this development. So yes, I don't expect it would require a licence. We're not using it as an alfresco area to that extent, but it would just certainly be works within the city's land that would require their consent to construct.
Well, there'd be an ongoing, I take issue that it's not al fresco, because people grab their food and go and sit there. And they obviously have to have some public liability insurance. There's also infrastructure there that will require to be maintained in perpetuity, and I don't think the council would want to take that on board. So I'm just exploring the possibility that, or asking the question, if the truncation has to be there, then does that facility disappear? Which you're making a virtue of.
In principle, I think it could be retained. I'll just hand over to Benham because the truncations deal with the sight lines. So what it might mean is that the laterite wall and the landscape that we install in that area has to be reduced in height, so we can provide that. So I think there is a scenario, subject to discussions with the city and understanding the liability issues, that could still be provided.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, as Mark mentioned, it depends that what we are trying to achieve with the truncation and what positive or negative implication you'll have. Generally speaking, truncations are provided to provide sight lines to both pedestrian and vehicles turning around the corner. And we have done an assessment and we established that the 6.6 or even bigger truncation is not necessary there. The small truncation more than achieved that objective. But more importantly, as I did mention, we may be still to maintain that facility, as you mentioned, but from my point of view, there would be too much exposure and lack of separation from the people who will use that facility to the traffic which would be turning the corner, because they would be right next to each other.
A crash barrier there or something.
Yeah.
Thank you. Do you have a further question? If there are no further questions, then we'll let these presenters, we ask the questions. I would also at this point like to acknowledge that we did receive a number of written submissions which we've considered at this meeting where presenters did not wish to present in person. Aaron O'Connor, Amanda Muir, Andrea Doose from Kalamunda Senior High School, Brian Stinson, Des Atkins, Eleanor Bennett, Kathleen Madison, Chris Simonson and Sarah Pedro. Acknowledging those. The next thing that we do now is refer to the officers at the City. And I think in the room there we have Nathan Ritchie, Director of Development Services, Regan Travers, Manager Approval Services, Cardia Mariani, Principal Statutory Planner, Angeli Palmer, Senior Statutory Planner, Raktim Barua, Coordinator Development Engineering, Steve Yap, who is a Principal Consultant from Beale Consultants on behalf of the City. So I'll invite panel members now if they have questions of that group. First of all, to panel members in the room, Mayor Ritchie, did you have questions of the City staff?
Oh, sorry, me.
Sorry, did I say Mayor Ritchie? I'm elevating Councillor Ritchie and sorry.
To be confused, I've already asked plenty of questions of the staff and already have those answers, so no further.
All right, thank you. Sorry, Mayor Thomas. And Councillor Ritchie, did you have questions of the staff?
No, I'm much the same. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Panel members in the room, Ms Page, did you have questions of the staff?
Yes, please. And the first one relates to the structure plan and the policy. So there are a couple of questions in there. I'll just read that out and you can answer. So I'm keen to understand what the status is of the draft structure plan. When are you likely to receive a final decision on it? Are there any changes to that document likely that could affect this proposal? And would you need to review the local planning policy concurrently with or once the activity centre plan has been finalised?
Through the chair, thank you. Regan, the Manager of Approval Services, talking. In terms of the status, it's right at the end, so it's sufficiently finalised. We're not expecting anything other than minor administrative changes. For example, as recently as the last week or two, we were just asked to change the format, the digital drawing format of one of the plans. So we're not expecting any further changes. So for the purpose of the planning assessment, definitely in the realm of it being a seriously entertained document that should guide and have the decision maker should have regard to. In terms of the impact on the local planning policy, the two were prepared together, and due to the delays in the structural plan making it through the approval process, the local planning policy was adopted in advance, but they were prepared in parallel, so we wouldn't expect any substantial changes to the design policy as a result of the structure plan being adopted.
Thank you. In relation to the applicant's request to amend and consolidate conditions 3, 4 and 5 and effectively change the timeframes for delivery of some of those actions to bring them to a single point of implementation. You would have heard my questions to the applicant a bit earlier. Could you comment on that, please? What are your views on that, those amendments?
Yes, I did hear those questions. The city's standard approach to writing conditions is to make it really clear and step through each requirement. So that's why you see conditions that have a specific topic and usually a deadline or a barrier to progress to the next step. We like those conditions. It makes it a lot easier for the city to enforce. In this circumstance, the applicant is asking for those conditions to be combined to allow them some operational flexibility, given that there's likely to be some back and forth discussion on final designs for intersection upgrades, the timings for those reports, and it allows them some additional flexibility given their ambitious timeline they've set should they get approval The city has no concerns with combining those conditions. If anything, we think there's a greater risk to the applicant and landowner by doing that, because it puts more pressure on them to deliver those things. So no concerns raised there.
Okay, thank you. We also note your response to the R13 request for information about a follow-up design review panel review. Do you think the changes that have been made to the design subsequent to the last review might shift some of that panel's thinking? I know you can't speak for them, but I'm wondering if you feel that might shift some of that panel's thinking on the design and its alignment with SPP 7.0. I guess what I'm going back to the presiding member's question, do you think you were to take that back to the panel, you'd have less red and more other?
Knowing our panel, like many, they established their views quite early, pre-lodgement even, and whilst I think that they would acknowledge the improvements, I think it's unlikely that they would change the colours from red to green, for example, but the improvements would be acknowledged. So the planning officer's assessment has taken that design advice on at face value and balance that with the other considerations. I think as the applicant has put forward, there are limitations with this type of development that, given the distance between the built form that's required for their normal operations and the aspirations and built form guidelines that the city has in place to assess that development against, that's not going to get a red to a green without basically redesigning and throwing out the existing proposal and starting again. So I think the concern or the amendments would be acknowledged, but it's not going to move the dial significantly for them in terms of the traffic light system.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have questions, Mr. Colthouse? Okay. Just a couple from me. In terms of condition 3 that you have proposed, which is to do the PIA prior to the application for a building permit, what are you anticipating is going to come out of that and the investigations into the interim upgrades to the intersection? Similar to my question of the applicant, how does this interplay with the distribution of uses and parking, etc., on the lot for the development, and also how does it interplay with the issue of the truncation, or are they completely separate things?
Through the chair, thank you. I'll probably deal with the truncation one first because that's a bit simpler. The discussion before was about what impact would a change in the truncation have on the existing design. A 6 by 6 metre truncation would have a very minor impact on the plans that we have at the moment and would easily be considered as part of under a minor change to the existing approval, should it be approved. In terms of condition 3, the intent there is to deal with the current uncertainty in the first instance about what is the appropriate standard. What we know is that, what the city would put to the panel is that the development, acknowledging that there are pre-existing traffic issues at this location, which are foreshadowed and addressed in the strategic documents, the scope for the planning system to deal with this intersection is also limited to the impact that this development actually will have. So when we talk about an interim arrangement versus an alternate scenario, the interim arrangement is about what is required for this intersection to function and accommodate this specific development. So that's the limit of the scope of that condition. When we're talking about the ultimate scenario, that's looking at the whole of the city centre, the multiple intersections along Canning Road, which may also require other upgrades, but fall outside the scope of what the planning system allows us to consider as part of this application. We would expect that there would be a consideration, a holistic consideration through that traffic impact assessment of all the other relevant traffic factors. So impact on downstream pedestrian crossings, including consultation with local businesses and the community as well, to really round out and make sure that we're genuinely dealing with that issue, because from the city's perspective, it's really the critical technical matter for this assessment. There's discretion in other areas, but the traffic one really is the core matter for us.
All right, thank you. Just one other question around the parking. We heard from presenters today their concerns that there's been a potential for cumulative or double dipping in terms of what this lot does, whether formally or informally, as a parking area for IGA and Bottle Shop previously, and losing that, plus on-street parking, plus a shortfall in the allocation for this particular development will have a critical impact. Could you advise me, please, of the status of this lot at the moment, whether zoned or just informally a car park, and how in your parking assessment you took into account how it functions at the moment, or how this particular shortfall in parking might impact given that context?
Through the chair, thank you. The city's assessment considered obviously the scheme and structure plan requirements for this type of land use, and made an assessment based on that. That shortfall, as you can see, and as was presented, it's common for the city to receive applications that seek a concession or discretion, the application of discretion with car parking standards. We are in an activity centre, a centre area. There is a lot of on-street parking available, and the planning framework documents we have to guide us indicate that there is capacity across the town centre to accommodate parking demand as it shifts from one site to another, which can be beneficial, and definitely the city would prefer that all parking generated by a development be provided on site. However, there are appropriate occasions to depart from that standard. In terms of this specific site and how it was previously used, for a long period of time, it was formally tied to the supermarket across the road as reciprocal parking. So that was reflected in the city scheme. It was reflected in the approvals over both sites. So that was essentially formal off-site parking. That was dealt with through an amended development application a few years ago, which resulted in the new car park being built behind the supermarket to account for the on-site parking arrangements. Yes, there was discretion applied in that case, and we see that after a long period of time with really little development within the city, we've managed to have a couple of development applications all in the same spot. So it's been an interesting one for us, but largely the parking demand within the city, whilst busy at times, which is great, does have capacity to accommodate a smaller shortfall.
All right, thank you for that answer. Are there any further questions of the officers? Were there any outstanding comments that you wish to make, city officers, before we move ahead?
Through the chair, I'll just make the comment that from the city's perspective, there were no concerns raised with any of the proposed amendments to the conditions put to the panel by the applicant.
All right, thank you very much for that. That draws question time to a close, and we will now move ahead with the Responsible Authority report. We will take the Responsible Authority recommendation first, and we are recommended to accept this as fast food and motor vehicle wash land uses compatible with the objectives of the scheme, and to approve it subject to a number of conditions. I'm seeking a mover for that, please, as the first item. Is there a mover, please? There is not a mover for that recommendation, therefore that lapses for want of a mover. I will now call for an alternate. Do I have a mover? This page called as an alternate.
Thank you, President Member. So I propose to move an alternate to defer this application for up to 180 days in accordance with our standing orders for the following reasons, and I can provide this to the Secretariat.
If you would like to read those out, and then I'll seek a seconder.
So for the following reasons. 1, to enable the applicant to work with the City of Kalamunda to agree the scope of a modification/upgrade to the intersection of Canning Road and Heathrow to facilitate the operation of the development. 2, to enable the applicant to prepare and submit an amended transport impact assessment to the satisfaction of the City of Kalamunda. 3, to enable the City of Kalamunda to prepare additional commentary on appropriate timing for implementation of the modification/upgrade to the intersection of Canning Road and Heathrow. 4, to enable the City of Kalamunda to provide additional commentary on the impact of the parking shortfall on this site when considered in the context of other parking shortfalls that have been approved in the immediate vicinity of the site, and any justification for those shortfalls based on parking availability on or adjacent to the subject site. 5, to enable the applicant to provide and the City of Kalamunda to assess additional evidence-based justification for the proposed 24/7 trading hours, particularly the context of likely demand for these extended trading hours within the Kalamunda community. 6, to enable the city's design review panel or panel chair to review the amended design and to provide some final comments on the proposal.
Thank you for that. Is there a seconder, please, for that as the primary motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr. Coltaz. We have a mover and a seconder. Ms. Page, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you. And I need to, for the benefit of the other people interested in this, moving this deferral not necessarily because I feel that I can't support the land use in this location. That's going to be a tricky one for this panel because it's a permitted land use. It's more about deferring this application because I think I'd be more comfortable making a decision on it if there was documented agreement to the scope of the intersection upgrades, and if we were able to approve the application with a condition to implement that agreed scope of works ahead of occupation. I'm not saying I need to review the technical detail of that work. I'm not a traffic engineer, which is a good thing probably. But I would like, as a planning decision maker, to have that additional certainty if and when we approve and condition. I also want the certainty, and I'm a little confused or concerned about changing the timeframes for some of the city conditions. I don't want the city to find themselves 12 months after the fast food outlet has commenced operations, trying to get the scope agreed and trying to have the works finalised, and then having to try and take compliance action against the owner of the land for breach of a planning condition when there are delays for whatever reason. And I'm not saying that that's likely to occur, but I think as people that have worked in local government, and I did for many years, it's not outside the realms of the possibility that the city of Kalamunda finds themselves 12 months after it started operating, still trying to get the work done, and there are real reasons for not having it finalised. We can't get a contract, or we can't agree this, or there's an issue with the scope, or so on. So I can just imagine from the City of Kalamunda's perspective the amount of financial and people resources that it could cost the city in having to deal with that once the fast food outlet is happily trading its face off in this location, and it's left to the city to try and fix this, particularly when this is a contentious application site for the broader community. I just think that needs to be sorted out before we make a decision. There also appear to be some unresolved matters, or matters that the DRP were dissatisfied with. And I note the city's comments that it's unlikely to shift the dial from red to green, and absolutely understand that. I'm more interested, and I use those words, but I'm more interested in what the panel or the panel chair might have to say about the impact that those proposed changes have brought. I also understand design review is one of many inputs into assessment of a DA, and in requiring this, I'm not saying the city is not well equipped to draw their own conclusions on how the changes made to the design have shifted the dial. I think that comes across in the report. I just think there would be benefit in the panel having one last look at this before bringing it back to the DAP for a decision. So that's my primary reasons.
Thank you, Ms Page. As seconder, Mr Coltas, would you like to speak to this motion?
Yes, I had also foreshadowed maybe a deferral as well on this, and the first issue that the trading hours, I don't take the view that just because McDonald's operates everywhere 24/7 that they have to everywhere else. In fact, they don't in some areas. So I think that getting some further information on the trading hours, because that is an amenity issue, and I think that needs to be justified in some way. As well, the certainty with the conditions in terms of the work that's required to be done. I think leaving it sort of hanging for a while, it's a pity that that wasn't resolved up front, and it could have been presented saying that as a condition, we all agree that this should be happening. But I realise the commercial realities of acquiring sites and getting approvals to comply with conditions or just these sorts of things have to happen. And I agree with the design review panel having some further input. I'm not saying that council officers don't have the expertise and wherewithal to do that, but I think that given the nature of this development and the community interest in it, I think it would behove the council and applicants and the panel to have a review of that. So I support the proposed deferral with the issues raised by Ms Page being addressed and back to us.
Thank you, Mr Coltas. Other speakers for or against this motion? Mayor Thomas.
I am against the deferral because nothing that the applicant can do, and I acknowledge that the applicant has worked really hard with the city and made a lot of changes. And while I'm at it, I also want to acknowledge the excellent presentations and submissions of our residents with real data. But my problem is, this is an old town, and the way the streets are set up is not ideal. But that's what we have. And no deferment is going to change that. And also, it's not a sleepy little village that it once was. ask any of the residents along Kalamunda Road or Canning Road, which are both near this development, if they can get out of their drives under 20 minutes, particularly in peak hour. So nothing is going to change that. Knowing this was coming up, I sat in that car park in my car at different times of the day, quite a few times, and frankly, this intersection is a mess now. What sort of mess is it going to be with all of this extra cars and things happening? And I'm just not sure any changes can change that. And I just don't want us to have this what were we thinking moment at some time in the future. So saying to support the deferment indicates that I would be looking at this again with the changes, and I just don't think any changes can fix that. So I will be not supporting the deferment.
Thank you, Mayor Thomas. Councillor Ritchie, did you want to speak for or against the motion?
Yes, I do, and I was obviously unaware of the alternate motion, and I had prepared to speak against the original motion, which I would still like to do so. But I would echo Mayor Thomas's comments that effectively any change to that intersection is not going to change the traffic situation. But I would, if I can, I'd like to speak against the original motion and in turn, therefore, against the deferral.
Yes, please go ahead.
So in speaking against the motion, I am cognizant of the work undertaken by the city's officers. At previous hearings, I have never looked to deviate from their recommendation. However, I cannot agree with their conclusions and hence the recommendation to approve the application. Before outlining my reasons for the objections to the recommendations, I would like to acknowledge the community opposition to the application. I understand that community opposition is not in itself a reason to approve or reject a development application. However, in this instance, it's worthy of note and consideration. In my time as a councillor, I have never seen such a groundswell of opposition to any development. Community meetings, public forums, both online, written permissions, pay testament to the depth of feeling. In addition, phone calls from the elderly residents immediately to the south of the development have been characterised by genuine distress and a sense of powerlessness as they enter the last decades of their life. So my objections to the development are as follows. As recognised by the city officers, the proposal has demonstrative level of non-compliance with State Planning Policy 4.2, Local Planning Schemes 2 and 3, and Local Planning Policy 30, the Kalamunda Activity Centre Built Form Guidelines. Firstly, State Planning Policy 4.2 states that activity centres have a compact urban form with pedestrian-dominated streetscapes. Further, street design and the urban structure is conducive to and prioritises access to and within activity centres by walking, cycling and public transport. Private vehicle trips to and within the activity centres are minimised, reducing the demand for parking. This has particular resonance with this application as both proposed developments are car-centric and will significantly increase traffic to the extent that it requires road configurations or modifications. Rather than minimising or reducing the need for parking in the area, the development increases the need for parking as it is adjacent to two high-use retail outlets, one current supermarket and one under development liquor store. The city's design review panel recognises the disconnect with the policy by considering the removal an amendment to a drive-through component to create more pedestrian scale and active frontage and a better consideration to the town centre. Secondly, Local Planning Policy 2 provides requirements for signage, and as noted by the officer's report, this development does not comply with three of these provisions, namely the height, width and separation. Thirdly, Planning Policy 30, Kalamunda Activity Built Form Guidelines, complement the planning requirements of State Planning Policy 4.2 in creating a set of development standards that allow the town to evolve and grow in a cohesive structure focused on a pedestrian-orientated environment. It specifically states these guidelines are applicable to all developments within the activity centre. As acknowledged by the officers, the McDonald's development does not meet 7 of these required provisions, including street setbacks, awnings, glazing, on-site parking and floor levels. Further, the car dog wash does not meet 9 of the required provisions. It's to be noted that Planning Policy 30 concludes where there is conflict between the proposed development and the design guidelines prevail. Clearly, this is not the case. Parking. The proposal fails to meet the parking requirements for food outlets as stated in Local Planning Policy 3. While acknowledging the officer's suggestion that there is sufficient local parking, it is unlikely that families with small children looking to use the restaurant and play area will cross a busy road to do so. More likely is use of the limited parking on the adjacent supermarket site, and conversely those who currently use the proposed development site for parking will continue to do so. With the removal of the development site, which is currently used for parking by the supermarket customers, competition for the limited street parking will increase, resulting in increased congestion. It's also to be noted that 5 designated street parking bays are to be removed to facilitate the development. Thirdly, amenity and environment. There are a number of considerations that can be considered to reflect the amenity of the development. Firstly, the amenity of neighbouring residents. There are 80 units for elderly residents within a 250-metre radius of the development. It's to be observed that the majority walk or use mobility scooters to the town centre using Heath Road several times per week. The increased traffic on Heath Road and Canning Road will be of concern for their safety. There has been one fatality of an elderly resident when crossing Heath Road. The elderly neighbours immediate to the south of the development have particular concerns. Their homes were in place before the introduction of the activity centre and the change of permissible land use on the development site. While the setback from the boundary is compliant, the drive-through at the rear of the building is adjacent to these neighbours. Idling cars, loudspeakers, taking orders 24 hours a day are unlikely to be completely mitigated by the sound treatments. Further, no mention is made of the dog wash and the likely barking of dogs at any particular hour. There is also concern with the 24-hour 300-candle illumination of the McDonald's sign spilling onto these properties. Secondly, both the built form policies and guidelines and the design review panel recognise the context of Kalamunda as an historic, semi-rural town with a village atmosphere in a peri-urban setting, not a densely developed urban area. It is not located on a major transport route, rather a Category 2 regional road. Buildings in the town centre date from the late 1800s, and the proposed built forms do not complement these buildings or the pedestrian-orientated nature of the town. The building to the north of the proposal is nearly 100 years old, and its awnings, glazing and minimum setback demonstrated what is intended in the built form and activity centre policies and guidelines. As noted earlier, the design review panel suggests consideration be given to the removal of the drive-through component to create a more pedestrian scale, an active frontage and a better consideration of the town. Also to be noted is that there are 3 other fast food outlets in the town centre that do not have drive-through components, even though these businesses do so in other locations. They have located their businesses so they are compliant with the built form guidelines. Officers note that there is an existing fast food outlet located on the opposite side of Canning Road, which is set back from the street and has vehicle access surrounding it. This business was built prior to both the activity centre and the built form policies and guidelines. However, it is not close to other high-use businesses, has no direct access to Canning Road, and which has, unlike this development, limited if any impact on traffic flows, congestion or volumes. Thirdly, environmental considerations. In the original arborist report, 4 significant trees were identified. Only 2 of these are to be retained, despite the design review panel suggesting at least 1 more could be retained with a modified design. Proposal to plant crepe myrtle and jacaranda trees is of concern as both are subject to and hosts of shothole borer, which is present within 300 metres of the development site. In summary, I acknowledge the proposed development is a permitted land use and the proposed car dog wash is a discretionary land use which is open for this panel to approve. However, the number and extent of the modifications and exemptions proposed to the State and City of Kalamunda policies totaling 10, The car-centric nature of these businesses resulting in significant increases in traffic numbers and congestion, which will necessitate a change of road configuration and the resulting loss of convenience to residents. The effect on adjoining businesses from decreased parking and increased congestion, the complete lack of endorsement by the city's planning review, the lack of parking spaces for a 60-seat restaurant, the loss of amenity and safety for neighbouring elderly residents, and the failure to recognise the semi-rural and historic nature of Kalamunda are collectively factors to be considered by the panel. It is the sum and extent of these which does not allow me to support the proposal. Finally, every application before a development application panel and its final determination is unique to specific site circumstances. However, of note is the rejection of the development application in the neighbouring semi-rural and historic setting when the panel considered a proposal for McDonald's in Guildford. That panel concluded that the heritage integrity and the adverse impact on local businesses through traffic and parking were major contributing factors in their rejection. The ruling was upheld on appeal to the State Administrative Tribunal, and I believe the circumstances of this development allow for a similar rejection of this application. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Ritchie. I will speak to the motion. I will speak in support of the deferral. We do need to consider the application, however, in the context of the planning framework and note the permitted and the discretionary uses. However, we are asked to apply our discretion in that respect. And in that context, I find that there are a number of unresolved issues that concern me. Before coming into the meeting, I was concerned about some of the difference in the interpretation of the data presented in the background information, particularly some of the traffic and movement data. And what I've heard today in response to questions and listening to presentations regarding distribution, movement patterns, peak hour queuing, etc., hasn't changed my concerns. In fact, that's one of the reasons that I am speaking in support of the deferral, is that I want to reserve judgment on the application until the design detail for the intersection, the interim design detail, the relevant traffic impact assessment associated with that, and an agreement about what is clearly the need and the nexus associated with this development proposal has been determined. I'm quite uncomfortable about leaving all of that to a future, and particularly with any revision as proposed of conditions that might leave that to a future beyond the actual occupation and operation of the development. So I feel it's our responsibility to have some of those details better understood and determined before making a decision, so that we are properly informed. Other matters such as the overall design and the operating hours, which have been discussed today, I think there is an opportunity to provide further resolution of those, and particularly in the context of the amenity of the adjoining residential development. And I think those can be reviewed in conjunction with the intersection design and indeed may provide us with some additional advice, particularly from the design review panel or from the applicant, to further inform our decision. It doesn't mean that, at this point we are not aware that there are a number of aspects of this development which can be ticked off and are capable of approval within the framework. But equally, there are a number of unresolved issues, I think, which will determine whether it's appropriate for this location, whether there is safe access and egress, and particularly what infrastructure might be required to support this development in this location, if that's the way we go forward. So I'm in support of the deferral. I will refer back to the mover, Ms Page, for the right of reply and to close debate.
Presiding member. I just wanted to make a couple of final comments. Picked up on the point made about the number of submissions on this, and absolutely those are noted. There were a significant number. And I think somebody rightly pointed out it's not a numbers game, and just because there's a lot of submissions on a planning matter, which gets dealt with under the Planning and Development Act versus under the Local Government Act, not different weight, but we have to place a different focus on those submissions, and those submissions, while critically important, are one of many that we have to take into account. So a decision to defer is not ignoring those submissions. On the contrary, there has been some, I had in my mind coming into this meeting that I wasn't comfortable making a decision, particularly for approval today, based on the information I had in front of me. Listening to some of the members of the community strengthened that view in my regard. I didn't feel that we were on solid ground to go straight to a refusal today, as suggested, for a few reasons. One was the underlying planning framework allows for uses like this. If we're going to just reject it outright on the basis of the land use, this panel decision would be on very thin ice, and power could be removed from this panel to make the best decision possible for the benefit of the local community. So to immediately go to a refusal based on land use predominantly, in my view, would have not been a responsible decision for me to make. Equally, before forming a view on whether I'm prepared to support it, or whether I'm confident enough refusing it for reasons that sit around that land use permissibility, I didn't have adequate information today. And I feel there was a lack of evidence-based rationale or justification for some of the key issues that have popped up. So I would rather the panel defer and we allow to digest that properly, so that if this was to go to an appeal, if we were to refuse it in the future, I'm not saying that we will, we at least have made that decision on the basis of all the information that we needed. It just makes any decision stronger. If we move to an approval in future, we are doing so knowing that we had all the information, and not just based on well, but we'll sort that out in the future, and we'll sort that out in the future. So this is not avoiding a difficult decision. I'm not a fan of deferrals generally, but this is to make sure that when we make whatever decision we make in the future, it's based on solid information. This is a contentious application. It is upsetting the community. We need to make sure whatever decision we make, we get it right from a planning perspective. So that's the whole purpose of me moving the deferral today. That's it.
Thank you. Debate is closed. We will go to the vote. Those in favour of the motion to defer as read out, please raise your hands. Those against the motion to defer, the motion is carried 3-2. Those for were Mr Coltas, Ms Page and Ms Hyde. Those against were Mayor Thomas and Councillor Ritchie. I will return to the agenda now. If I could just get your indulgence for a few more minutes. We have no more DAP applications at item 4. We have no SAT reconsiderations at item 5. This particular Outer Metropolitan DAP does have a SAT matter for the City of Gosnells at the moment. And that brings us to the close of the meeting. And I would just like to thank everybody for your wonderful patience today and your participation and coming with a number of different thoughts and ideas, which you presented very well. Thank you. And to the applicant, thank you for taking all our questions in good spirit and for making your presentations to us. And thank the two elected members, Mayor Thomas and Councillor Ritchie from the City of Kalamunda, and the officers also who responded to our questions, and thank the panel members in the room and the Secretariat who kept things rolling for us today, and draw the matter to a close at 11:54. Thank you.